a massive black wolf slammed its body against a wall of stone. Claws raked granite. Teeth tore at moss. The beast snarled, low and hungry, refusing every command thrown at it. 6 warriors closed in behind, hands on weapons. One reached for the wolf's collar. The wolf spun and snapped, jaws an inch from his throat. The man stumbled back pale. Nobody had ever seen him do this. Not in 8 years. Not for any reason. This was the Alpha King's own beast, and he had locked onto something no man could see. Behind that stone wall was nothing. Trackers had cleared the cave 4 years ago. Twice. 3 times. The wolf would not leave. He clawed until his pads bled. He howled until his throat cracked. What he found in that cave answered a question that had haunted a kingdom for 4 years. Stay with me on this one. To understand what the wolf was doing, you have to understand the man inside that wolf. His name was Chaol Draven, Alpha King of Vargmoor, 29 years old. The youngest king his people had crowned in 200 years. Now here's the thing about Vargmoor. It was a kingdom of wolves. Not the kind in stories you tell children. Real ones. Men and women born with a second skin. A second heart that beat under the first. When the moon rose, they ran. When their king ran, the whole kingdom listened. Chaol had been king for 7 years. He had buried a father and a mother in his first month on the throne. He had taken the crown at 22, with 2 younger sisters at his side. Mara 14. Ira only 9. Believe me, he loved those girls more than the crown itself. 4 years ago they vanished. It was a spring evening. The girls had ridden out with a small guard to visit the old shrine on the eastern hills. 8 men. 2 horses. A clear sky. They never came back. By the time the search parties reached the road, the guards were dead. Throats torn open. The horses were gone. The girls were gone. And whoever did it had left no scent. None. Now think about that for a moment. A wolf kingdom. A kingdom whose hunters could track a deer across 3 rivers. And there was no scent. No fierce sweat on the saddles. No blood trail beyond the bodies. As if the girls had been lifted out of the world. Chaol ran himself half to death searching. So did his wolf. Every cave. Every ravine. Every stretch of forest from the northern peaks down to the salt cliffs. 4 years. Nothing. The kingdom mourned. Then the kingdom moved on. They had to. A king cannot rule a country of corpses. Chaol learned to wear the grief like a second cloak. He sat on the throne. He signed the treaties. He fought the border raids. And every full moon when he changed, his wolf still went out alone and ran the same trails. The same cold trails. Year after year. This is where today comes in. Today started normal. A council meeting. A grain dispute. A long argument about taxes on the western farms. Chaol was halfway through listening when his wolf stirred under his skin. Not the usual stir. Not the moon pull. Something sharper. Like a hand grabbing the back of his neck. He stood up so fast the chair scraped. The council looked at him. He didn't speak. He walked out of the chamber, down the hall into the courtyard. By the time he hit open ground, he was already changing. Clothes shredded. Bones shifted. The black wolf burst out of the man and went hard north before the guards could even call for their horses. The wolf ran for 2 hours straight. He climbed into the foothills of the Hollow Range. Past the pine line. Past the old hunting paths. Into a stretch of country the kingdom had given up on a long time ago. Sheer rock. Scattered caves. Nothing but wind and stone. The trackers used to call it the dead mouth because nothing lived there for long. 6 warriors caught up to him on horseback at the base of a cliff. They had to leave the horses and climb. They found their king's wolf at the mouth of a cave, halfway up the rock face. He was clawing at a slab of stone wedged inside the cave wall. Snarling, bleeding from the paws. The lead warrior, a captain named Rurik, knew this cave. They had searched it. He had personally walked it 4 years ago. He had walked it again 2 years after that. There was nothing in there. A short tunnel, a back wall, a dead end. But the wolf was tearing at the back wall like the whole world was on the other side of it. Rurik tried to pull him off. That was when the wolf turned and almost took his throat out. Rurik had served Kale since they were both boys. The wolf had never so much as growled at him. Not once. Now here's the thing every man on that ledge understood, even before they understood it. If the king's wolf was breaking his own paws to get through a wall, there was something behind that wall. And whoever put it, there had counted on the fact that no man would ever look twice. Rurik did the only thing he could do. He sent 2 men down the cliff for picks and rope. He sent 2 more back to the king's lodge for healers and a wagon. He kept 2 with him, weapons drawn, watching. And he waited. The wolf clawed for another full hour. Even bleeding. Even with one front pad torn down to muscle. He would not stop. Rurik had seen this animal kill 3 men in under a minute during the border wars. He had seen him bring down a bear twice his size. He had never in his life seen him afraid. But there on that ledge, watching his king tear his own body apart against a wall of granite, Rurik understood that fear and grief look almost the same when they live inside an animal. The picks arrived an hour before sundown. Rurik approached carefully. He knelt low. He spoke without looking at the wolf. He said, "I'm going to help you. Step back. Let me help you." The wolf understood. The wolf almost always understood. He stepped back, breathing hard, and dropped onto his haunches. His ribs heaved. His muzzle was foamed white. He watched. The first pick rang against the stone. The slab was thick. 3 feet of it, maybe more. But it was set not natural. Whoever had wedged that stone in the back of the cave had not done it casually. Mortar lined the seams. Old mortar. Decades old by the look of it. Older than 4 years. Much older. Rurik felt something cold crawl up his back. He did not let it show. He kept swinging. It took 6 men 40 minutes to break through. The slab came loose in 3 pieces. Behind it was dark. A drop. A second chamber. The air that came out was wrong. Stale. Sweet. The kind of sweet that belongs in a place where things have died. But no death stink. That was the strange part. No rot. Rurik lit a torch and lowered it on a rope. The chamber was small. Maybe 12 feet across. Carved, not natural. Smooth walls. A flat floor. And there, against the far wall, 2 shapes. 2 small shapes lying side by side on a stone shelf. Rurik's heart stopped. He swung the torch. The light caught long hair on one of them. Dark like the queen's. Lighter on the other. He couldn't see faces. He couldn't see if they were breathing. He climbed down himself. He went slow. He didn't want to know. He had wanted to know for 4 years, and now that the answer was 3 steps in front of him, he didn't want to know. He reached the shelf. He held the torch up. 2 girls. 2 girls asleep. Mara. Ira. The older one, 18 now, looked exactly like the 14-year-old who had ridden out to the shrine 4 years ago. The younger one, who should have been 13, looked 9. They had not aged a day. Rurik dropped the torch. He picked it up with shaking hands. He stepped closer. He pressed 2 fingers to Mara's throat. There was a pulse. Slow. Slower than a sleeping pulse. But there. He pressed 2 fingers to Ira's throat. Pulse. Slow. There. He looked up at the hole in the ceiling where the king's wolf was watching with his front paws on the broken edge. Rurik said, "They're alive." The wolf made a sound that no man on that ledge ever forgot. Not a howl. Not a growl. Something in between. Something that sounded almost like a question. They got them out. Carefully. So carefully. 2 men on the ground caught the bodies as they were lowered in blankets. Mara first. Then Ira. Their skin was cold. Not corpse gold. Cool like river water. Their breathing was so shallow you had to watch the chest for a full minute to see it move. But they were breathing. The healers met them at the base of the cliff. The wagon was ready. The wolf would not leave the side of the wagon. He limped on 3 paws. He bled. He kept walking. By the time they reached the king's lodge, the moon was up. Kale shifted back behind a screen in the courtyard. He pulled on a robe. He walked into the chamber where the healers had laid the girls. He stood at the edge of the bed, and he looked at his sisters. His sisters who were the same age as the day they vanished. His grown brain could not hold what his eyes were seeing. He pressed a hand to his mouth. He sank to his knees beside the bed. He put his forehead on Ira's small hand, and he wept the way men weep only once or twice in a life. The healers bowed and stepped back. They gave him the room. For an hour, that was the only sound in the lodge. A king crying over 2 sleeping girls. Outside, the wolf inside him was finally quiet. The clawing was over. The searching was over. The thing it had been hunting for 4 years was here, in this room, breathing. For the first time since the spring evening 4 years ago, Kale felt his shoulders come down. He sat back on his heels. He brushed the hair off Ira's forehead. He whispered, "You're home. You're home. Whatever it is, we'll fix it." Outside the window, an owl called once. The lodge settled. The candles burned low. Kale leaned over and kissed Mara on the temple. He stood up. He told the healer at the door to call him the moment either girl stirred. He walked to his own chamber to wash blood from his hands. It was over. He thought it was over. He had no idea it was just starting. Kale had been gone less than 10 minutes when the younger girl opened her eyes. The healer at the door saw it first. Ira blinked once. Twice. Her chest rose with a real breath, deep and full. She turned her head on the pillow. The healer ran for the king. Kale was halfway through pulling on a clean tunic. He didn't bother with boots. He came back down the hall barefoot. He came back into that room, and Ira was sitting up, slow, like a child waking from a long fever. She saw him. She didn't recognize him for a second. 4 years had turned a 25-year-old brother into a 29-year-old king. And then her eyes focused. Her mouth opened. She whispered, "Kale." He came across that room in 2 strides, and he gathered her up against his chest, and he held her. He didn't speak. He couldn't. Ira clung to him. Small hands. Small arms. She felt like she had felt at 9 years old. Because she was 9 years old, even if the calendar said she was 13. And then she pulled back. Her face changed. Whatever sleep had held her under had cracked, and what was underneath it was not relief. It was terror. She looked over Kale's shoulder. She looked at the door. She looked at the windows. Her breathing started to come fast. She grabbed his collar with both hands. She said one word. She said, "Uncle." Cale went still. He said, "What about him?" She said, "Don't let him in. Don't let him in. Don't let him in." Now here's where the story turns. Lord Hadron Draven was Cale's father's younger brother. He had stood at Cale's coronation. He had stood at the funeral when Cale's parents went into the ground. He had been the steady hand on a young king's shoulder for 7 years. He sat at the council table to Cale's right. He had personally led 3 of the search parties for the missing girls. He had wept at memorial services. He had paid for the search dogs out of his own treasury. He was, by every measure a kingdom uses, family. Cale did not move. He held his sister and he kept his voice level and he said, "Ira, look at me. What did Uncle do?" Ira's whole body shook. She said, "He put us there." The room dropped into a silence, so complete you could hear the candles burning. The healer in the doorway took one step backward, like she wanted out of the conversation she had just heard. Rurik, who had been standing in the corner, did not move. His hand was already on the hilt of his sword, and he didn't even know when he had put it there. Ira said, "He gave us tea. At the shrine. We drank it. Then he told us we had to go to sleep for a little while. Just a little while. He said he would come back. He said," her voice broke. "He said it was for the kingdom." Cale's wolf, lying on the floor at the foot of the bed, lifted its head. A growl started in the wolf's chest. "Low. Building." Cale held up one hand without looking. The wolf went quiet. He said to Ira very gently, "Why did Uncle do this, sweetheart?" Ira's small face crumpled. She looked at her older sister, still asleep on the next pillow. She looked back at Cale. She said, "Because of the prophecy. The one the witch told him. That you would die without an heir, and he would be king, but only if we were gone. He said," she gasped for air. "He said he could not kill us. He was not that man. He said the cave would keep us safe and asleep until he did not need us asleep anymore." She started to cry. She said, "Why did he not come back, Cale? Why did he not come back to wake us up?" Cale could not answer that question. But he knew the answer. Hadron had not come back because he had not needed to. Asleep, the girls were as good as dead for the line of succession. Awake, they were a problem. The longer they slept, the cleaner his path stayed. And the cave had been built for it. Built decades ago. A holding cell of stone and old magic, made by someone in the family bloodline a long time ago, kept secret, kept quiet, used. Cale held his sister. He pressed his cheek against the top of her head. He said, "It's all right. It's all right. I'm going to make this right." But his voice had changed. The man who had been crying 10 minutes earlier was gone. The thing that had taken his place was the alpha. Cold. Steady. Old. If you're still with me on this story, take a second and hit that subscribe button. There are stories like this one every week on this channel, and I promise the next ones are just as good. Now back to it. Cale laid Ira down on the pillow. He pulled the blanket up around her. He kissed her forehead. He said, "Sleep. Just sleep. You're safe." And she believed him because he was her brother, and even at 9, you can hear the difference between a man's voice and an alpha's voice. Ira closed her eyes. Cale stood up. He turned to Rurik. He said, "Where is my uncle right now?" Rurik said, "In the south wing. With the council. They are waiting for word about the girls." Cale nodded once. He said, "They'll have word." He walked out of the room. The wolf walked with him. The south wing of the King's Lodge was where business got done. Long table. Maps on the walls. A fire that never went out. 6 men were at that table when Cale walked in. His uncle was at the far end, in the second seat, the seat that had been his since Kale's coronation. Hadron was a tall man, silver at the temples, black through the rest. The same eyes as Kale's father. The same nose. The same easy way of leaning back in a chair like the room belonged to him. He looked up when his nephew came in. He smiled. The smile was tired and worn, and full of a brother's shared grief. He said, "Kale, we heard. Tell me, are they?" Kale did not let him finish. Kale said, "Stand up." The room went very still. Hadron's smile didn't move at first. Then it cracked just at the corner. He said, "Nephew." Kale said, "Stand up, uncle. On your feet." The other men at the table looked between them. They didn't know what was happening yet. But they had served in this hall long enough to know that when an alpha drops his voice an octave, you do not move and you do not speak. Hadron stood up. He did it slowly. He kept his hands open at his sides. He said, "Kale, whatever you have heard." Kale said, "Ira told me." Just that. Just those two words. Hadron's face did not change. That was how Kale knew. A man falsely accused jerks back. A man with nothing to hide opens his hands wider. A man whose secret has just walked into the room goes still in a particular way. He goes very, very still. He does not blink. Hadron did not blink. For a long second, neither of them spoke. Then Hadron said very quietly, "How much did she remember?" The men at the table heard that question and understood, all at once, every one of them, what their counselor had just confessed to. Rurik drew his sword. The other guards at the doors drew theirs. Hadron's eyes moved to the windows, to the doors, to his own hands. He was calculating. He had always been a man who calculated. He had been calculating for 40 years. Kale said, "Don't." Hadron said, "Kale, listen to me." Listen, he took a step around the table. There was a prophecy. You don't know everything. The witch in the eastern hills, before she died, she told me. She said you would die without a child of your own, and the kingdom would split, and the wolves would scatter. She said the only way to hold it together was for the line to pass clean. To me. To my sons. He took another step. He said I could not kill them. I could not. I am not that man. I put them somewhere they could sleep until the kingdom was strong enough. Until you had children of your own. I was going to wake them, Kale. I was going to wake them when it was safe. I was protecting all of us. Kale listened. He did not interrupt. He let his uncle talk himself empty. Then he said 4 years. Hadron said, "Kale." Kale said, 4 years, uncle. Myra was 14. She had a boy she liked at the harvest dance. She wanted to learn to ride the long border. Ira had named every horse in the south stable. She was learning her letters. They were children. They were my children, in everything but blood. And I buried them in my heart 4 years ago because of you. Hadron said I was going to wake them. Kale said, when? When you sat in this chair instead of me. When my sons were dead. When? Hadron did not answer. Because there was no answer. Because the truth was the cave was a grave, and the only difference between the grave he made and the grave a knife would have made was that this one let him sleep at night. Kale said, I want to do this as a man. I am telling you that as your nephew. As the boy you taught to track in the snow. As the boy whose hand you held at his father's funeral. He paused. He said, get on your knees. Hadron started shaking his head. Started backing up. He said, Kale. Kale, please. The wolf at Kale's side stepped forward. Hadron reached inside his cloak. He came out with a short blade. The kind a counselor wears as ceremony. The kind that looks pretty and isn't supposed to do anything. He came at Chaol with it. The wolf was in the air before the blade was halfway up. 250 pounds of black muscle hit Hadron in the chest. The blade clattered on the stone floor. Hadron went down on his back. The wolf stood over him, teeth bared, breath hot on his uncle's face. Hadron was crying the way old men cry, without sound, his whole body shaking under the wolf's weight. Chaol walked across the room. He knelt down beside his uncle. He said, "No, not the wolf. The wolf is hers and Mara's. The wolf is for the search." He pulled the wolf back with one hand on the scruff. The wolf, panting, stepped off. Chaol looked at his uncle. He said, "You will be tried by the council. In the open hall. By the law of Vargmore. Every word of this will be heard by every man in the kingdom. And then you will be punished by the law. Not by me. Not by my wolf. By the law you tried to break." Hadron whispered, "You will have me killed." Chaol said, "No, uncle. The law will. And you will know the difference every minute until they do." He stood up. He said to Rurik, "Take him." They took him. The trial took 11 days. The hall was packed for every one of them. Lords from the eastern reaches. Pack mothers from the salt cliffs. Hunters who had ridden in every search party for 4 years. Men who had buried friends among those 8 guards on the road to the shrine. Ira told her story sitting on her brother's lap. She was 9 years old in the body, and she did not pretend otherwise. She held a wooden horse in her hand the whole time she spoke. Her own. Her favorite. 8 stable hands had kept it safe in her room for 4 years, dusting it once a week in case. Myra woke on the 4th day of the trial. The healers had said it might take longer because of how she had been put under, but she opened her eyes that morning and she sat up and she asked for water. She asked for her brother. She asked with her hand on her chest why the cave had felt like coming home. The healers were honest with her. They said the magic had bound her to that stone shelf. It had taken her breath and slowed her body and tied her into the rock. When the wolf had broken the stone, the binding had cracked. Her sleep was already lifting on its own. She would have woken on her own within a day. Mara had listened. She had nodded. Then she had asked, "Where is Hadron?" They told her. She did not cry. She was 18 years old in the body, and she had lost 4 years of being a girl. She had questions for him. A lot of them. She testified on the 7th day of the trial in front of the whole kingdom, and she did not raise her voice once. She did not need to. Hadron was sentenced on the 11th day. The law of Vargmore was the law of Vargmore. Banishment. A wolf without a pack. A man with no name. They cut his ties to the bloodline at the public square, in front of every wolf in the capital. They put him on a horse with a week of food and a single blade, and they pointed him north, toward the hollow range. He rode away alone. He did not look back. What happened to him after that, no one in the kingdom asked, and no one told. There are some endings a wolf people understand without saying out loud. Now here's the part I want you to hear. The cave on the hollow range had been built 3 generations ago. Mara's testimony confirmed it. Hadron had told the girls about it on the way in. He had been proud, the way old men are proud of clever things. The cave had been carved out by a great uncle of theirs who had also wanted a throne and had also lost it. He had built the cave to hide a rival. Then he had died before he could use it. The cave had sat empty for 60 years, waiting for the next ambitious man in the family to remember it existed. Chaol had it sealed. Permanently. He sent a crew of stoneworkers up the cliff with 20 barrels of mortar. They closed the mouth of that cave. They closed the ledge. They closed the path that led to the ledge. By the end of the summer, the dead mouth was nothing but rock again. No cave. No chamber. No shelf. Cale went up there alone the day they finished. He walked the new face of the cliff with his hand on the stone. He whispered something into the rock that nobody but the wolf inside him heard. He came back down. He did not go up there again. Mara took to her old room, then asked after a week for a new one. The old one belonged to a 14-year-old. She was not a 14-year-old anymore in the parts that mattered, even if her face had not moved. She moved into the east wing. She started taking lessons again. Reading, writing, the history she had missed, the treaties of the last 4 years. She would not be a girl who married a boy at the harvest dance. That girl was gone in the cave. She would be something else. Ira stayed in her old room. Her old bed. Her old toys. She was 9 years old. She wanted to be 9 years old. The kingdom let her. The healers said she would catch up to her body in time. There was no rush. She had time. Cale kept ruling. He signed the treaties. He fought the border raids. He did all the things a king does. But the heaviness was gone from his shoulders. Friends who had known him before the disappearance said he laughed again that summer. The first laugh anyone had heard out of him in 4 years. And the wolf was different too. He did not run the old trails anymore. The cold trails. The ones he had walked every full moon for 4 years. He did not need to. The thing he had been hunting was home, sleeping in a bed 3 corridors away, holding a wooden horse. When the moon rose now, the wolf ran for the joy of it. He ran with the pack. He ran with the king's hunting party. He ran the borders. He ran himself happy. Sometimes very late, when the lodge was quiet, the wolf would push into the room where the girls were sleeping. He would lay his big black head on the foot of the bed. He would close his eyes. He would listen to them breathing. That was all he had ever wanted. That was the whole answer.